didn't even think for a second. We didn't talk equity. We didn't talk game plan. I mean, my life just went 180-degree turn in the time it takes to listen to a voicemail.
We are excited to share our conversation with Pete Dupuis this week. Super successful entrepreneur in a tough fitness industry, an all-around awesome guy who we're lucky to call a friend for many years now. He got his MBA from Babson College, co-founded Cressey Sports Performance. It's a super baseball-centric outfit, grown to have an impressive list of all-stars and professional baseball players under their wing. And also just in general, extremely influential in the world of gym ownership. Very well-spoken, as you'll hear, honest and transparent as they come.
It's good to have a guy who fits like right up your alley, Matt Namoli. I mean, he has a gym that's geared towards baseball players, which you know and love, and he owns a gym, which you've done in the past.
Everything about this guy, I just smile ear to ear.
Not ginger, though.
No, he's not ginger.
What I would say is that for those of you who are not Matt Namoli, there are a couple big things to listen towards that you will relate to right away. One, how a very key voicemail changed his entire career path. It's extremely interesting. Also, how he refers to his business as an off-season clubhouse for major league players. I mean, so sexy. And number three, which I know you and I, Matt, were like right to our chest, is what matters most in the first year of your business. Three big takeaways. This was an excellent conversation.
It's really interesting to talk to entrepreneurs, business owners of like super successful, nationally recognized companies within a pretty specific niche and hear about how they started. It could have been a completely different experience and journey if just one day or one moment or one conversation hadn't happened, and especially for these guys.
Yeah, he slowed down and he clearly made the right call. I think a lot of you listening and watching right now are going to get a lot of value from Pete. Pete is an excellent follow. In the show notes here, we'll give you his Twitter handle as well as his Instagram. He has a fantastic newsletter that's worth signing up for. If you're in a field that has competition, this guy has separated his business perfectly. Listen up. It's a good one. Welcome to the Big W. Really honored to have you on. I think you bring a really interesting perspective to a lot of our listeners. You guys own a gym. There's so much loud noises about gyms just in general. It just seems like a lot of people treat them as one and the same. And you guys have really carved out a really special niche. We're really excited to highlight it and talk about it. So thanks for taking time. This is probably one of the more monumental ones because my co-host, Mr. Matt Namoli, is a former, in my mind, a Hall of Fame baseball player, but in the annuals of Factual, he's the best baseball player I've ever met. Let's put it that way.
And our kind of go-between is Matt Maurizio, who's also obviously a Hall of Fame baseball player of sorts. I mean, yes. You guys have seen Matt swing a bat. He is an offensive powerhouse.
One of the best Hall of Fame catchers I've ever met.
Receivers, right?
Yes. And an all-around great dude. Can you just talk about going into business for yourself, what you felt Babson did for you, like how that really shaped you and molded you and made you more confident, or if you feel like it didn't really matter where you went, you would have done this route anyways?
The doesn't matter where I went thing doesn't jive with me. I am one of the everything happens for a reason people, but the biggest thing that I took away from Babson, both as an undergrad and a graduate student when I got my MBA, was the ability to fine-tune my networking skills and appreciate the fact that to a certain extent, wherever you go, there you are for college. I'm not making the argument you need to go to the school with the highest Princeton review rating or whatever it is these days that people are concerning themselves with. I thrived in an environment where all of the students around me were entrepreneurial in nature. And so Babson's claim to fame, they were top entrepreneurial studies school in the world for the better part of the last couple decades. And the funny thing for me is I never took an entrepreneurial studies course once while I was there. I took B2B marketing courses. I was just kind of staying in this tight little lane from a marketing perspective. And I didn't ever at any point while on campus in either round think of myself as a future entrepreneur. I was kind of punching the business school clock and saying that eventually I'm going to be very employable. But when you take this networking thing full circle, well, Fall of 99, I set foot on campus for the first time, and I had a randomly assigned roommate named Eric Cressey, who today is my business partner. So if that's not, college networking, I don't know what is. It laid the groundwork for my closest friends in life and a lot of my current network kind of professionally and personally. So it's a huge deal for me. It's just not for the reason that maybe Babson advertises. I didn't take any exceptional, managerial or accounting skills or things like that away from my experience there that I couldn't get on the internet probably for free right now. But it doesn't mean it didn't shape my professional being. It's maybe a pivot in their marketing strategy that they're not leaning on so hard right now, but they do foster an environment where you learn the importance of getting to know the people around you and understanding that we all have opportunity to share with each other.
Did Eric go there for entrepreneurship?
No. So Eric and I both went to play soccer, and neither of us ended up playing a single minute of soccer at Babson. Which is a whole different story. But he went to school thinking he was going to be an accountant. He's from a family of CPAs, and that was his aspirational identity at that moment in time. But what do we really know when we're 18 and we think we figured that out? So he made it 2 years at Babson. And during that time frame, he did discover his passion for exercise science and an interest in it. And he transferred out after our sophomore year. And he went to the University of New England to complete his undergrad. And then he went to UConn for his graduate school and got a kinesiology degree there, which I knew you would appreciate. He was one of the few people who by the age of 20 actually said, this is it. Like, this is the thing that speaks to me. And he didn't swing and miss there. He knew it. And so he chased it real hard from the minute he was a junior in college on. And I stayed the course because I didn't have any idea what I wanted to do. But thankfully, my dad said to me back in the day, if I could go back in time, I'd go to a business school. He said I'd go to Bentley or Babson because he was a Massachusetts guy. And he said I'd go to one of those two schools. If I didn't know where I wanted to go, that would be the place that I'd feel the most comfortable coming out of. And, one of those rare occasions where I took my dad's advice at that age and I said, all right, I'm just going to do that, and fell in love with the pretty campus and that sort of a thing. But Eric was out, and we stayed as close as you can back at that time without smartphones. We were instant messaging back and forth and staying on each other's radar for later on when he circled back into town 6-7 years later.
Was the MBA right after, or did you?
No, it wasn't. I put in about 3 years living in a cubicle, working for a publicly traded company. So it was a Maytag distributor. I was a marketing rep in the company who was basically almost an admin to the sales team that was trying to close the commercial contracts on campus at colleges and universities around the country. So I quickly realized there wasn't a whole lot of room for growth in that space. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to go get my MBA. It's something I thought I might want to do. I didn't have a great plan. To an extent, I was avoiding reality. And I went and I got the 1-year MBA at Babson because I already had the undergraduate degree there. And it was great from a serendipitous standpoint because it put me in the right place at the right time to start my business when Eric did come to me and say, hey, I'm thinking of doing this. But it was on paper super reckless. Like, I don't know that I could look either of my boys in the eye, my sons in 15 years from now, and say, yeah, leave the job with the 401k and, all the benefits and start a gym. That's a good idea. And my dad, I'd say, if anything, he kind of bit his tongue and said, all right, go learn that lesson. Is kind of how it was treated. And here we are, almost 14 years later, still doing it.
You bring up a really memorable moment for any entrepreneur, wherever they are in their journey. They can always look back to those conversations pre-launch when they're having with their parents, their family, their close friends. No one is without a story of sharing, this person I care deeply about, they care deeply about me. They were shocked, they were wide-eyed, they were very much against the concept, or they were very nervous about it. Was that the feeling with your dad when you had that conversation?
I was less than a month removed from my MBA program. I had been training with Eric, he was working as an independent contractor in a gym, similar in theory to what we have today. And it was not a particularly healthy operation. He was doing over 50% of their top line revenue. He stood to make or break that operation, basically, if he were to leave. And we always, while we were doing kind of our buddy training sessions, we talk about business and what we would do to that operation if we were to acquire it ourselves. And then one day we were like, well, let's see if we could acquire this. And we went to the 3 owners and we said, hey, what do you guys think about the 2 of us acquiring 51% of this place, keeping everybody on board, but making some tweaks to the model? We have this vision. And long story short, just didn't happen. Not everybody could get on board with the mindset. Not everybody wanted to become the minority owner of a situation like that. So we just said, cool, no harm, no foul. We move on. And I started pursuing other opportunities. So on Friday the 13th, it's an easy date to remember, of July of 2007, I had 2 job offers with a 5 p.m. deadline, like an expiration on them. Let us know by 5 p.m. So one of them was with Reebok, back when Reebok in Canton was a deal, marketing manager role with the Rockport brand underneath their umbrella. And the other one was with an advertising agency, purely coincidentally on the New Balance account. And today we have an ongoing relationship with New Balance through this business, but independent of that. And so I called my dad and I said, Dad, I've got a decision to make on these 2 jobs. I am coin toss, don't know what direction to go. What do you say we play golf tomorrow and we talk it through? And so we met up over at the country club that my family's a member at, and we played 18 holes and we walked off the course. And I said to him, all right, I'm going to go accept the Reebok job. It's the job for me. And he says, I agree. Sounds like the right one. 4 hours of kind of casual deliberation. I leave him. I go to the car, turn on my phone because you don't bring the phone on the golf course back then. And there's a voicemail from Eric that says, hey, things just kind of went south at my existing gym. I'm out as of today and I'm starting my own thing. You want in or you want out? And before calling my dad, talking anything, going back into the clubhouse, I just called Eric and I said, I'm in, and I declined 2 jobs. Didn't even think for a second. We didn't talk equity. We didn't talk game plan. I just knew that deep down, I wasn't that psyched about the other 2 jobs. So I called him and I just said, let's do this. And an hour later, I was in Hudson, Mass, and we were walking a space that we were going to be subletting. Like, I mean, my life just went 180-degree turn in the time it takes to listen to a voicemail. And I'm so thankful I did it and understood the fact that at the time I was 25. I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have a wife. I didn't have kids. I didn't have what anyone would qualify at my stage in life now as real responsibilities. And so I jumped. And we did it. And I think I've said to Zach many times in the past, we were too naive to realize we could fail. This was just like, of course it's going to work. Let's do it. I didn't even call my dad that night. I remember it took a couple of days. It was like Sunday night. I called him. I was like, hey, I just had the most exhausting weekend. I started a business. And he's like, what the hell are you talking about? I said, oh, yeah, that thing. I forgot to tell you. Called Reebok, said no. Called the other place, said no. I decided to start a gym, Dad. So I couldn't see the look in his eyes on the other end. Probably. But I'm certain that he looked at my mom and maybe gave him like the mind blown real life emoji type deal. So that's my story.
Yeah, he probably thought that you just tried to screw him out of a free round of golf, and you'd already like planned this months in advance. You're like, Dad, I think we need to play golf together and get together and deliberate.
Well, it's so out of character for me to do that with him. We've got a great relationship. I can count on one finger the number of times in life I said, Dad, I need you to help me make a big decision. And he helped me make it, and then I spit in his face. And so it was just one of those strange moments in life where you don't know what's coming at you. But in hindsight, it's pretty funny to look back on.
Looking back, how much would you say it was Eric, who he was, and your relationship to him versus just entrepreneurship and the journey that you wanted to go down, this no employer type of relationship?
So people ask me in our fitness space a lot what the recipe is for finding a business partner, because we have a pretty good dynamic here between myself and Eric. And my answer is typically that there isn't really one. And the good fortune that I had was that we got to basically vet each other out in the most unique of circumstances possible, which is living together. And so you guys probably remember your first college roommate, the first time you had to learn how to peacefully coexist with someone who wasn't from your immediate family. That's a trying time in life. You learn a lot about who you are when you're in a confined space away from home for the first time and no one to fall back on, no parents looking out for you. So we got to see each other for who we really were. We got to see work ethic. We worked together on a couple of projects during that year. And so this was like the most low risk business partnership decision one could make, because I genuinely knew what the pros, the cons, the quirks, the weaknesses were, and him the same. He knew where I was going to bug him and where I was going to thrive. And we both made a very rational and logical decision to go into business together. I'd love to say that that's recreatable and easy for people. Sometimes you got to trust your gut and take a jump because there isn't enough time to, put 9 months together on campus in a situation that your parents are financing. In our case, this was very much a decision of, I know this guy, I know he cares too much to fail. And so I made that strategic decision. And it has since taught me when I've had opportunities to say, partner with others on maybe an event that we're coordinating or kind of carve out ideas for alternative business models. Sometimes I will just go with the people that I watch their work ethic and I see how they approach their day to day. There are a handful of people in this world who I would say, I don't need to know what the business model is or what the idea is. Just want to do some work with you. I could probably count 4 or 5 people that fall under that category, and Eric's one of them.
You guys open a gym. I can understand why your dad's kind of like, whatever, like there's so many of those. So what happened? Why are you around 14 years later? What did you guys fall into here?
Well, I understand your inclination to say a gym, they're all Planet Fitness basically, and we're very different. It's probably first important that I explain to your audience how different we are. And this is a discussion I find myself having mid-pandemic somewhat regularly as we try and justify why we should be allowed to reopen our facilities sooner than a big box commercial gym. But what we are today is, I would say, a semi-private strength and conditioning facility. So we employ a 5-to-1 client-to-coach ratio. Everyone who comes through our doors is assessed individually, and then we design training material specifically for them based on their background, their goals, their expectations. And then we decide exactly who we're putting in the room, what they're doing, and when they're going to be here. So there is very little variability to what's coming. We can control the narrative over the course of the entire day, and I can control social distancing, I can control equipment usage. All of these things are very meticulously planned. So when you hear Pete owns a gym, well, I own basically an off-season clubhouse to a couple hundred affiliated Major League Baseball players. And so we're so much more than a room full of treadmills. We designed this operation to be appealing to a guy like Matt. We'll say Matt circa 10 years ago, right? We want this to basically emulate a Division I college weight room and have this environment where the community vibe and culture is every bit as important as the quality of the training material that we're putting in place. So we're not running a big box commercial gym. There's no unexpected drop-ins. There's no hope that people are going to pay for a membership and then not use it, which really is their model. And it's just an entirely different operation.
I think when I introduce you to friends and other people, it's like you own an off-season clubhouse for Major League Baseball players. I think is like, that is a sexy business card, part one. That is awesome. When you and Eric were first talking, I'm guessing it wasn't like, okay, what we really got to do is make an off-season facility for me. So it also wasn't we ought to have to open a big box gym for absolutely everybody. So what was the first conversations and how did you find your way into baseball?
Part of the reason that I knew this was a low-risk decision and a good move was because Eric had been building a book of business as an independent contractor in the space that he was in. And where he was seeing a little bit of momentum was with a baseball population because Eric coincidentally blew up his shoulder as a high school athlete, primarily with tennis. And he was told that he required surgery to address it. And the student in him said, no, I'm going to figure out a workaround. I'm going to learn kind of the anatomy that's going on here, the problems that I'm encountering, and I'm going to see if I can train around it. And I'm going to delay the inevitable surgery for as long as possible. And not only did he do that, to this day, he still has not had that procedure, but he learned a lot and he started publishing content on it. So over the course of the years leading up to our opening, he was positioning himself as an influencer in the shoulder health space. And you combine that with the fact that our first little 2,500 square foot space was inside the back corner of a pitching and hitting instruction facility. And we just had this perfect storm of baseball. But the day that we opened, my client avatar wasn't just baseball players. It was anybody with a credit card in their wallet who wanted to come and give us a shot. And I think that's an important thing to mention in the fitness space, because what's happening in a lot of these kind of smaller facilities that have popped up over the last 10 plus years is They see the success of a place like this where we're the baseball guys, and they think they need to pick a niche and then chase nothing but that niche. And it's just not what it was. You got to earn the right to get selective about your clients. I remember we had this guy, Tony, who trained with us. He was in his late 60s. He could barely hear anything we were saying. He was totally not the client avatar, but he was my favorite client in year one because he left a credit card on file and he always showed up when he said he was going to. And sometimes those are the people that you have to build around while you are aspiring to be positioned as the guy at something. And so General Fitness Pop was a big, big part of the early stage for us before we acquired the baseball space. But we have since really ramped up the baseball because we earned the right to do so. And now we're about 85+% baseball specific clients through our doors every day.
I'm glad you shared that because it's something that Zach and I have been talking to people in our industry for years about, because the word niche and the concept of targeting a specific population, especially in light of the Geicos of the world spending billions of dollars and the need to kind of feel like you don't want to compete with them. People feel like that's what I have to start with and I have to find this lane. But to earn the right to pick your clients, I love that line because ultimately, how do you know who they should be and why should they choose you? Just because you put a flag in the ground? You have to start with a broad brush, with a wide net. And then you realize, okay, this is a better qualified client for me, or I'm better suited to help this type of individual. And I think that's really valuable for our listeners, especially those who are in the early stages of their entrepreneurship journey, to understand.
It's also worthy of note that we were very fortunate to predate social media for our initial go around. In this day and age, we romanticize entrepreneurship on social media and we only showcase the wins, right? And so what we were able to pull off back then was a little bit more singularly focused on just being operationally efficient and running the business logically. And we weren't distracted by an Instagram post from the gym that we think is the gold standard. I could count on one hand the gyms that were the gold standard at that time, and they weren't in my market. But now there might be 100 gyms with 1 million+ followers. If I use them as my benchmark, I'd be trying to be everything to everyone. And I wouldn't be able to stay focused on what matters. And in year one, what matters is making sure that your business is systemized, making sure the language we used while we were selling was consistent and that the team was basically preaching the same message. But fast forward these 14 years, the people who are starting a gym, they're faltering and niching down too early, partially because of the distractions. There are too many people to listen to. There are too many businesses to emulate. And we came in the dark ages. I mean, Twitter became a thing less than 60 days before we started our gym. Like Twitter actually, and it hadn't hit a point of critical mass. It wasn't even a viable thing. It was just conceptually in like a beta stage the day that I started my gym. Facebook didn't have a news feed or business pages. I remember sitting in my office the day that suddenly my homepage was a news feed and not my own picture. And I remember being pissed and looking at Eric and our old business partner, Tony, and being like, this isn't going to work. And here we are. So the point is just that we weren't enticed by the wrong things. Our sole objective in that early stage was to stay in business. Always make sure that we don't spend any more than we collect and we're here.
That's perfect, though. And I think a lot of businesses kind of romanticize, like Matt said, they have a flag in the ground and therefore I've declared my niche and now all of you will follow. Where people are looking for different things and sometimes you're not solving a problem. So when Matt and I, when we were at GNN, we didn't start by trying to insure the most real estate in Massachusetts. We didn't know what that even meant. We had a pivotal moment with a specific referral partner that really kind of grabbed our attention and said, whoa, we could actually like double, triple, quadruple down in just this sphere now, little kind of hush-hushish. And then if it works, we'll be really loud about it. And that's kind of what we did. So did you and Eric have a moment where you guys knew like, man, like we got to double, triple down in baseball. Like this is where we have to go. We have to focus on our 80-20. Can you speak to that?
We launched in July and a couple months in, we had a all hands meeting. And by all hands, I mean myself, Eric, and Tony, our other co-founder who's since moved on. And it was me raising the alarm saying, guys, I'm having a hard time getting the local field hockey, football, basketball players into our gym. And on more than one occasion, they've referred to us as the baseball gym. And I called the meeting asking how we were going to pivot to make sure that we could stop being perceived as so specialized. And thankfully, Eric said, "Who's the baseball gym?" Tony was like, "I don't know. I could tell you who the football gym is. I could tell you who the hockey gym is, but I don't really know who the baseball gym is." And so Eric said, "That's it. That's us now. We double down on baseball. We're going all in." And so that was the inflection point. That was the moment in my career and life. And I say life because I met my wife through a client and further down the road. But it was everything. Like if that moment hadn't happened, we might still be in business, but we wouldn't have an audience. We wouldn't have a following. Eric wouldn't be working for the Yankees right now. We'd just be another gym. And right now we're niched because of that exact moment there. You said something that kind of caught my attention where you said that you guys had a referral partner, that was your moment where you're like, this is the thing that we could really monetize very effectively. And obviously it's a relationship more than it is a monetization scheme, but it was your moment. For us, that was the local high school varsity baseball coach. So the Lincoln Sudbury head coach at that moment, we got buy-in from him because we showed results to a couple of his players and he realized we cared about the athlete as much as we cared about collecting their dollars. And he came in to see what we were doing because he was seeing the results. And he walked out that night and he's like, "I'm going to get you everybody. I mean, all of my guys should be here. It's in their best interest. They're going to be healthy. They're going to throw harder. They're going to be in the right environment. You guys seem to be people who could be role models for them in your mid-20s. Like we were cool to them at that age. Now I'm just the old bald guy with kids, but I pay people to be cool for our athletes now. But at that time, we had created an environment that he felt comfortable saying to kids and their parents, these guys, like this is a place you can send your kids and know that they're going to do right by them. And him and one athlete in particular on his team changed the game for us. I mean, they put us in a position to really snowball this baseball thing. And when we realized how effective that relationship was, we went right to the next town, one town over, and we established the same relationship with that head coach and his captains. And then we went to the next one and to the next one, and the dual county league around here. I mean, there was a point where we probably had 40-50% of the athletes in the entire dual county league here in our gym. And instead of being rivals, they were starting to create training groups together and realize like off field, they were buddies because of this place. And so we were facilitating development of the local baseball community as opposed to creating this like West Side Story, like the Jets and the Sharks, like staring at each other across the gym. It was the complete opposite. And it was pretty cool to watch.
I mean, it makes sense how you moved through high schools and how that might have organically spread successfully. But how did then you find yourselves moving vertically through the next levels, through college, and then ultimately through into professional baseball, and now having a pretty hefty clientele of really successful individuals?
The unfortunate reality is that a lot of it is keeping up with the Joneses. I mean, Matt, you growing up being a Division I athlete, if the best catcher, since you were a catcher from a town over, came back one season, he had 2 home runs in his junior year, and he came back his senior year and he hit 15. And word got around like this guy just hit the weight room and was training responsibly and was following baseball specific material. I'm pretty sure you would have gone home and been like, "Hey, Dad, I would like to explore this gym that's one town over. They seem to have the recipe." And so that's how we moved across all of those, because the big leagues is no different. If enough high profile guys see results, somebody's going to call them and say, "What's the deal?" But for us, we had this interesting moment where we realized we were our clients, our affiliated guys. So let's say we're back in like 2008, 2009. We've got 1 or 2 guys in the big leagues, but we've got like 30 or so minor leaguers. They were amazing referral sources so long as it wasn't to an athlete in their organization, because we were their secret sauce. We were their competitive advantage. We were their job security. But it kind of sucked at the same time, because we were like, "Hey man, you love what we're doing. You're here more than I am." Like back then I had pro guys who were like here when I arrived and sitting at the front desk when I left, because we were the clubhouse, as I said. And I'd say, "Can you do me a favor and bring a few guys back next off season?" And they'd look at me and they'd be like, "Man, I love you, but no, no, I don't want anyone on a faster track to the show than me. So how about this?" And I remember them saying, "You know what? I'm going to connect you with my agent. He reps guys all over the league. He's been asking me about you guys and what we're doing. Why don't I just connect you with him? He'll be a much better referral source for you. And that was the moment that we realized, you know what? If we show huge results to one athlete, he'll put us in line with reps or agencies that have a much bigger reach and scale. And so we started developing relationships with the player reps who were navigating the off seasons on behalf of their guys. And next thing you know, our favorite client who refused to send us someone from the Braves because he was going to potentially take his job in spring training, his agent got us Kevin Youkilis that offseason when he was the starting third baseman for the Red Sox. So that was kind of the way that we navigated that path on the pro level and continue to today. Guys who are in the big leagues, they're friends with everybody all over the league. They're not only talking to their teammates. So we get a lot of referrals that way now. But back in the day, it was players trying to keep up with each other at the amateur level. And then it was players trying to avoid letting their secret out at the professional level, but they were willing to give us the keys to their, agency contacts. And so that's how we did it.
But you went upstream. I mean, you went upstream to that agency, representative. And that's brilliant. I mean, and it's very similar to what, Zach and I really tried to focus on, working more on the networking side of B2B to drive our end user, which is essentially the same thing you guys did.
We touched on my job as a marketing manager for a commercial laundry company. I'm pretty sure I stole some IP from them. And I remember in 2009 or so, I took my old template, like our pitch deck that we used to send off to schools to secure laundry contracts. I cleaned it out and I used it as a pitch deck for agencies. And Eric and I sent off cold, like 10 different pitch decks to agencies saying, here's a testimonial for 2 or 3 pro guys. This is a link to a video of a parent talking about what we do. And we just got it onto the desks of as many agencies as we possibly could back then because we were nobody to anybody. And I was using the template. It was like an Adobe Acrobat template or something that I used back then on their network that I had on a thumb drive somewhere. And we made it our own. And we started hitting agents with these pitches. And God knows if any of them actually read them. I can't really remember. We weren't really effectively tracking like what kind of lead gen we were getting out of it. We were just putting it out there.
Was anyone else trying that method to drive new clients to the door?
As far as I know, no. There might be 10 pretty solid baseball specific conditioning gyms that are taking care of athletes. The market, I mean, based on the like 10,000 guys who are playing baseball professionally at this point is such that there could probably be 100 of us and we could all still live and eat and pay our bills. But of the 10 right now, 0 of them predate us. And I did business consults for a handful of them. Like my biggest competitor now, who we get along with very well, I did a phone consult with him to help him introduce a semi-private model at his own space 6, 7, 8 years ago. And he'd tell you that today. And we kind of allow the industry to think that we're at odds because we compete for business, but we exchange emails and calls and talk about the trouble we face.
I wanted to talk a little bit about that because I think that's an interesting part of your journey here. You hit on it a little earlier that professionals sometimes don't want to, at least earlier on, didn't want to give away their secret sauce because they're like, this is how I started to hit 15 home runs. I don't want to give it to Doug in my league as well because et cetera, et cetera. And you can argue that's a scarcity mindset, but that's their paycheck. So there's a lot of different things going on there. They're paid for their body. You and Eric have taken a very different approach, actually the polar opposite in your fitness community. Whereas, yeah, you might charge a nominal fee, but basically you give away all the recipe to other gym owners to how to operate, how to think, how to treat their clientele. Why do you do that?
99% of gyms can only win in their own market. So why am I worried about other people's markets? I would rather see the rising tide lift all of these gym ships so that the public perspective isn't that people fall into this mindset, oh, Pete owns a gym, he must be a Planet Fitness, where they lift things up and put them down. I would rather see all of the gyms in every other state kick ass right now. So collectively, we're a more respected space because we're not right now. There's no one lobbying for my industry right now. I am on Zoom calls with other gym owners where we're talking about hiring lobbyists because we realize nobody's going to bat for us to get us reopened. And part of it is just we're not a particularly respected industry. Nobody thinks that a gym has an MBA from Babson running it. And so to an extent, we want to pay it forward because it's in our own best interest. If all of us are better, I'm perceived as better. It's just practical in my mind. Like, why not push the industry forward? Because none of those people are competing on my turf for the clients who are paying our bills. We have unintentionally become a little bit of a national influencer and have a bigger audience and have people come to us for seminars and hosting for educational purposes. We can do that. And to an extent, I guess we're giving away the recipe on that front. But there aren't many players in that space right now. So I don't feel like we're giving away something that's going to cannibalize ourselves. But most gyms just want to be the best gym in their immediate market. And if I can help them do that, then wonderful.
Do you find that when people are reaching out to you or when you're helping them, they're looking to be name a sport type of gym? Or do you find they're just looking for advice on how to start? Where do you think people come to you guys most?
So the leads I generate for myself trend more toward general fitness, maybe a more evolved business. So it's a little bit more of a mature fitness business. So they understand that what they're looking for is just ways to become operationally more efficient and maybe cut the fat, trim the fat out of their operation. But the leads that Eric creates for me are people who dream of opening a gym. They've fallen in love with the dream of what they see in his social media and what they read. And they think to themselves, that's so cool. That guy trains Cy Young Award winners. That's my dream. And they reach out to them and they say, hey, would you consult me on opening my gym? I want to open this performance space. And he kicks them to me. And so
what's the first thing you say when someone like that specifically is presenting themselves and sharing that dream? I mean, how do you handle that?
Well, if you really think about it, my day job, so that's my side hustle, the consulting piece. My day job is taking phone calls from dads who call me and say, hey, this is Matt, my son Parker. He's 7, but a couple of guys who know something have seen him throw a baseball and they say that he's going to throw 95 someday. And so I earn my living handling what I would call helicopter dads and managing unreasonably high expectations like that all the time. So I guess I treat it the same way that I manage our sales pitch. And for us, I'll say, look, and this in the fitness space, I'll say, we can give you the tools that you need to accomplish wonderful things. But fitness the training piece is a very small piece of the puzzle. It might be 10, it might be 15%. But when you're not in my gym, I can't control the food you put in your mouth. I can't control how much water you drink. I can't control what time you get to bed. I can't control your sanity as it relates to your schoolwork, what your headspace is. There's so many variables, but we can give you all the resources you need to absolutely kill it. The thing is, you got to go out and execute. And that is the exact same thing from a business consulting standpoint. I could tell you 1,000 things to do tomorrow. Are you going to go out and do any of them is the question. And so I temper expectations from the start. I'm not going to let people have that dream. And one of the things that I think people need to hear from me, which I say often, is if I had to do this again today, I would not and could not create the same size audience we have, the same influence and the same following we have all that quickly, because there are a lot of voices shouting the same message at this point. So I'm not out of touch with the fact that we were a right time, right place business to a certain extent as well. I don't think that Eric and I are just that much smarter than other people, because I think first mover advantage is a thing. So I definitely keep expectations reasonable from the start.
I think you're very humble to just talk about the first mover advantage. I think we would agree. I think what a lot of businesses don't respect enough is just the element of time. And now there's a lot to be said about what you do with the time and the idea and how fast you execute and the bumps and the bruises and the persistence. That's important. But there's a heck of a lot of luck being just at the right moment, at the right time with the right people, and then using all that persistence. It really seems like that you and Eric formed a really special partnership and bond early on and trusted each other to almost like stay in your lanes and really like, Pete, you handle this really, really important thing. I'm not going to get too involved. I'm going to stay over here and really work on this. When has a moment, have you guys had moments where you guys have like actually crossed paths? Like, how did you deal with that kind of struggle where you guys are in such different lanes? How did you deal with that?
We haven't butt heads more than 2-3 times over the entire duration of the business, but I think it is because expectations were set pretty clearly early on in that sense. And the way that I realized we weren't going to run into issues was during those first couple of months when like I said, I had zero fitness industry experience. I didn't understand the space. I didn't know how to sell fitness instruction, especially because I had a couple months of strength training under my belt at that point. And instead of micromanaging that process, Eric kind of threw me into the deep end and just said, go get him. And in our first space, we had an office that was about the size of my office here right now. It was like a 10 by 12 office, and we had 3 desks in it. And when clients weren't in the gym, at the end of the night, we were winding down and I was returning phone calls and giving the pitch. Eric was sitting right here. Tony was sitting directly behind me, and I'm on the call pissing my pants, nervous because 2 established fitness professionals are listening to me try and sell a service that I don't fully understand. And instead of being like, hey, let me take this, I heard that question, you are not ready to do it, they let me sink. I mean, they let me crash and burn a number of times. Now, the minute I hung up, there was that, so how do you think that went, Pete? And we'd evaluate, and they'd say, the next time you do that, you might want to use these keywords, or you might want to ask this question. But they let me get kind of kicked in the teeth enough times in their presence so that I could kind of find my own selling voice. And that way I wasn't just reeling off a canned pitch. I was delivering a pitch that I created for myself based on their feedback. And I think it made me a much more effective and authentic seller. But it required a couple steps backward to take several steps forward for the next 14 years. And in that time, I realized that Eric and Tony wanted to see me thrive, but they were playing the long game. And it translated to everything in our relationship since then, because now I am an expert in my lane, and Eric will defer to those things. He doesn't micromanage any aspect of the business management piece here. In fact, if Eric walked into the building right now, he'd have no idea where to find the checkbook or how to take care of any of that stuff. He doesn't care to. And it's important that we kind of maintain that piece. And my relationship with Tony, who moved on in 2014, is the same, where we're talking on a monthly basis about how he runs his gym in Brookline, Mass. And so we respected each other's lanes and kind of metaphorical space within the operation. And it's really just been a very cohesive experience since that time. No stepping on toes, really.
I admire their ability to see the long game that early when things were so sensitive and vulnerable and you needed clients desperately. I know that if Zach and I had a sales rep or someone else who was on board in the early years, I would almost want to hit mute and be like, okay, this is what you need to say. This is how you need to say, we need that client, we need that $300, And so I give them a lot of credit for that.
Well, and if you had a camera in the room, you would see me looking at them being like, what do I do? I don't know that one. And they'd just sit there with their arms crossed and be like, keep going. Do what you got to do.
Yeah. Well, there's no better way to get your feet wet than diving in head first. But so on that relationship, I mean, if Zach in 2015, wanted to move to Texas or California or something and still continue to run the business, we could have probably figured it out. We would have audibled, we would have pivoted a little bit. We are in a business that does not require proximity, does not require foot traffic, does not require people coming in and getting professional consultation and service. So we could have probably managed that. When you guys, opened a location right in Florida, and you guys decided how you're going to separate out, what were you going to do with responsibilities and moving, and how did that work? That seems like it's such a difficult transition in your business to make.
It was tough. It was a ready, shoot, aim type deal for pieces of it. It came at a really tough time in my life because our first son was born 2 months premature. And so we spent over 40 days in the newborn intensive care unit at the hospital in Boston. And it was at the same time that we were planning this and getting ready for Eric transitioning away at the end of that summer. And it was in the springtime. And I remember saying to him, I want to push this a year. I can't be the factor that you want me to be during this time. I'm just mentally nowhere near where I need to be to take care of both. And he had competing demands as well, because we had people in Florida who were dying for us to get down there. We had people that we were partnering with where we were kind of acquiring an operation they had and bringing them on as co-founders. And he needed to make it happen at that moment. And I was like, all right, fine, I relent, do it. But I'm going to be the Massachusetts guy and you're going to be the Florida guy. And thankfully for him, his wife, who's a practicing optometrist here in Massachusetts, did not get licensed in Florida because she could kind of see the writing on the wall that she was going to be needed to help in some capacity down there logistically with making that happen. And to an extent, she became my role involuntarily early on. And I ended up working as much with her as I did with him on putting our systems in place and making sure it was up and running. And we did vet out the guys that we were working with down there so that I knew that I could trust them and I liked them and they seemed to have the same character and values that we had in place. So it wasn't that dramatic, but for me, it was at a time where I just didn't have the focus to be there. You know, the sky was falling on me. That first kid, he's born premature. You don't know what's happening. I thought like everything was crashing down on me at once. So that was a really exhausting and crazy year. And honestly, Matt, I have a hard time remembering how I handled it. I mean, you're in it right now, the sleep deprivation stage of parenthood. Well, I was in it 2014 up until 2019. This past year, we finally beat it. But 2014 was the apex of our business. I mean, we smashed it in 2014. And it was like right when Eric was leaving for Florida and we convinced ourselves because he was gone in Q4, like we've got this so figured out. Look at what we did in Q4. And I think we failed to see the kind of the momentum that we had growing multiple years worth there. And we never crashed, but we plateaued pretty hard from there. And it coincided with us having kids. We became dads and we were content with that plateau. And we stayed there for a couple of years until we kind of came out of that fog and we realized like, all right, let's scale it a little bit. We scaled it this past year and it went big. And then we got kicked in the teeth by a pandemic.
That's so valuable for people to hear because I think that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with is they're like addicted, like a drug to the drive and the climb and the growth and the speed. And then things happen, whether it's parenthood or not. Things happen, challenges occur in personal life, partnerships fail, whatever it might be. And you almost feel like the world crashed and there's no way to possibly come back if you stop the pace of growth. Not just, business could stay in business, but if the pace of growth stopped or stalled, you feel almost defeated. But I think a lot of people need to realize that the journey is much longer than just a few years or a few months, that you can plateau for a little while and then decide, let's put the hyperdrive on and really start to climb again. Was there a catalyst that caused that desire, or was there something that happened to say, hey, 2019, we're going to scale again?
Part of it was just we've got a really exceptional blend of people right now. Some coaches to really build around. I mean, my director of performance here in Massachusetts is a guy that I would hand the keys to our brand to for anywhere in the world. If he said, I want to open one of these, I would say, no questions asked. You can do this. You have our blessing. And so sometimes your bottleneck is just people. And we didn't have a bad team during that time, but I didn't have like an alpha who was ready to kind of employ ownership habits without equity. And that's one of the things that my guy John does is he said, look, there was a moment where I saw an opportunity here to act like I own the place. And he did that for a couple months. And it didn't take long for us to notice it and almost double his wage, because we realized this is the guy we can scale around. But unfortunately, I'm an owner with Eric, but I'm not a coach. I can't influence the dynamic on the training floor the way an exceptional coach can. And it just took us a while to find that guy. We've had tons of like A+ technicians, but if you guys read the E-Myth where you got your technician, your entrepreneur, and your manager, John's a little bit of each, and it took us a long time to find someone who was an A+ technician but had a piece of those other extra parts. And so I think that once we did spot it, kind of like our discussion about luck, well, if luck is where preparation meets opportunity, we were preparing to encounter a coach who had that mindset. When we finally had the opportunity, we hit the go button. And honestly, he deserves as much or more credit for it as any owner. And so I'm not a self-made man is kind of the best way to say it coming out of 2019.
It seems like a lot of your journey, maybe from like the top level, the niche gets credit. Meaning like you guys had the fortuitous mindset and the planning and the luck and whatever you want to call it, timing, to pick the right niche and double down and go in. But it seems like there's this sneaky undertone of that people mattered a heck of a lot more than the niche. Mm-hmm. And so like you and Eric coming together was incredibly special. This gentleman, John, Tony, early on, seems to be like a lot of really, really important people that you're naming on a first name basis, which isn't very common for a lot of people who open up a business. When you were going through your MBA, you were thinking about all these things going on. Was it ever taught like the value of people in the company, or is this just something that just like happened?
I don't know that it was necessarily that exact message, but I'll tell you what, the first day of college, like literally the first minute of the first class in the first lecture I sat down in 1999, I had this incredibly impactful professor. His name was Bob Marcus. I don't believe he's with us anymore. And Bob stepped up and addressed the class, and he said, look, you're here at Babson College, this world-class business school, and I am going to teach you the most important lesson you will ever learn. You might as well pack up your books and leave. And we're like 30 seconds into college and thinking, my God, we're about to get the recipe. And he said, learn to play golf. And in that moment, I sat back and I thought about it, and I'm like, what? Said, you know what? If you can carry a conversation with people within your network for 4 hours, you are going to come off the golf course with fascinating opportunities for growth. And obviously it was a tongue-in-cheek statement, but the message did connect with me. And I realized that you're going to need to learn how to interact with everybody and play nice if you want to thrive. And I think that has kind of carried forward in every class I went to after that, every business relationship I came into, every colleague I had at a cubicle next to me on either side in the 3 years that I was in the public space working for a publicly traded company. Of course, people matter. I mean, if you can't interact and you don't have a social awareness and that EQ, then you're not going to make it. And so on a very underlying kind of level, that's been my mindset since the beginning. And so my kind of networking within my own operation and looking for the person I can build around has been me playing golf metaphorically in my own space.
You know, earlier on, we were talking a little bit about 2014, your experience in the NICU, and then the plateau, the rise in 2019 after. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, similar to us all on the call, can relate to being a dad and the potential downturn in the attention to business that it correlates. Some people aren't all the same, but the 3 people on this phone call might be similar to that. What about being a dad would you say has helped your business the most?
Well, I think I had unfairly categorized the expectations that my employees would have for me coming into that. So I was not a terribly efficient user of my professional time pre-kids. I came to find out after having kids. And so it wouldn't be uncommon for me to be at the gym in my office till 7:30, 8:30 at night, because my wife's a hard grinding professional as well. And she was working her long hours too. So it wasn't an inconvenience for anybody if I sent her a text and said, hey, I'm home at 9 tonight. And she'll say, cool, I'll work late too. And we'll grab dinner. And, we were living in Somerville at the time. We'll walk into Davis Square and get dinner at 9:30, which is like mind blowing to me right now. 9:30 is when I'm falling asleep with Netflix on. But at the time, I could be inefficient like that, because a lot of my job was managing relationships and just socializing with clients and making sure that we were facilitating the loitering that we were seeing in this clubhouse dynamic that we were trying to create. But it meant that I wasn't getting my work done for big chunks of the day. If I had to play a game of ping pong with a baseball player in the athletes lounge to demonstrate, hey, we get you, this is your third space, welcome home, then I would do that at the expense of getting out of work on time. Well, all that stuff stopped in the spring of 2014, because my wife, understandably so, was not tolerant of me saying, hey, I'll be home at 9. Why don't you put Colin to bed? I got some ping pong to play. And so that changed. And I had this fear in my mind because I knew it was going to change. Obviously, common sense says be a good dad. And instinctually, you ultimately realize you do it whether you thought you were going to or not. But I thought that my employees were going to see it as me taking plays off and starting to say to everybody, like, hey, you got to pick up my share of the load because I am no longer prioritizing you. I'm focusing over here. But what I said to everybody was, hey, here's going to be the hard line in the sand. I'm out the door by no later than 5:30 under any circumstance. There's none of this lingering until 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. You're going to see me take this day off to spend with Colin. This is the way it's going to go. I'm going to get my work done, but it's going to be off your radar. And I thought it was going to be received poorly. And I had an employee come into my office once and say, hey, can I chat with you for a sec? when I was maybe 6 months into this. And I said, sure, come on in, have a seat, sit down at this chair right here. And he said, I wanted to tell you that I really appreciate you drawing such a clear line in the sand between work and family, because I want to have a family someday. And if I do work for you at that point in time, I'm not going to be afraid to ask. And I think that you are communicating to us as a team that there's more to life than just work, but we can still be very good at our job in conjunction with that. Beautiful. And it was this like bulb went off in my head where I was like, oh my God, I've been here stressed out of my mind every day leaving to get to daycare, thinking that people were mad at me. Like I was taking advantage, like taking these ownership privileges that just weren't reasonable. And I was out of touch with my team. And it was the exact opposite. I was earning points with them by saying, hey, it's my kids and my wife, it's my business, and it's everything else. And in that order, and it's non-negotiable. They loved it. And it changed the way I manage people. It changed my anxiety surrounding being equal parts dad and business owner. It was like he lifted a weight off my shoulders and gave me this free pass to think of myself as just as good at both, as opposed to picking one over the other.
We, as human beings, naturally create arguments and almost try to solve riddles that the other person might not even be thinking. The amount of times I enter a room in the past when I was like kind of high in my anxiety, I would already create the debates. I would know what I was going to kind of say if someone was said something, and they do all these kind of things. When in actuality, someone might just be being like, wow, I'm really glad Pete's doing that.
Stuff you can't learn in business school. It's not in a curriculum. You got to learn how to learn from your peers and your employees. And we didn't chase the scaling at that moment, but it was kind of permission in the back of my mind to scale when we were ready to leave the plateau. And had it not been said, I don't know if 2019 would have happened. Granted, Colin was 5 years old when we set those record numbers this past year, but still, I mean, here I am recounting it to you 5.5 years later that it was said. It had an impact, and I don't know that we would have chased the growth we had this past year or had the aspirational identity that is in place right now if I was still stressed about people thinking that I was being an owner that was taking a little bit of advantage.